I've always been the quiet one in the family, the observer, the one who smiles politely and picks up the tab without announcing it. That's how I was raised and that's how I lived. Never caused trouble, never asked for attention. But if there's one thing I don't tolerate, it's disrespect, especially when it's delivered with a smile. My son married her 2 years ago, and from day one I knew she had no intention of becoming part of our family. She didn't shake hands. She floated past them. She didn't ask questions. She made decisions. Everything she did carried the same unspoken message. I'm here now, and that's the only voice that matters. I kept the peace for my son's sake, for my grandkids' sake. I let her take over birthday plans, holiday schedules, even the family text group. I swallowed a dozen small insults because I told myself they weren't worth the fallout. But there's a difference between keeping the peace and letting someone walk over you in silence. And that morning at the airport, she crossed the line. We were all traveling to Florida together for my grandson's school competition. They'd invited me months earlier, and I agreed under one condition. I'd book my own seat, use my own miles, fly first class. I'm not young anymore, and I don't pretend to be. My knees don't like tight spaces. My back complains after an hour in coach. I wasn't asking for a favor. I was buying my own comfort. Everyone agreed, no issues, until we got to the gate. My son was parking the car. She and the kids went ahead while I checked the bags. I had one carry-on marked priority, and my boarding pass clearly labeled 1A. I met them near the gate. She had that look again, the one where she smiles with her mouth, but not her eyes. "Oh, good," she said, "we're all set." I nodded, sat down with my coffee and waited for boarding to start. The kids were restless. She scrolled on her phone. Nothing unusual until they called pre-boarding for first class. I stood up, reached for my bag, and then I saw her, already at the gate, already handing my boarding pass to the agent. I walked over, confused, thinking maybe it was a mistake. "What are you doing?" I asked. She turned, all charm and innocence. "Oh, I figured I'd take the first class seat so I can settle in with the kids. You don't mind sitting with them for a bit, do you?" I blinked. That seat was mine. She laughed like I'd made a joke. "You can switch with me once we're in the air. I just need a minute to decompress." No apology, no request, just a decision she had already made on my behalf. The gate agent looked unsure. I looked at her, then at the pass. My name, my seat, my miles. She handed it to the agent before I could speak. "He's with us. It's fine." The scanner beeped. She turned and walked down the jet bridge like a queen boarding her private jet. I stood there for a second. The agent asked if I was okay. I nodded, gave her the second pass that had been printed for me, one for economy, and walked back to my seat with the kids. My son returned a few minutes later. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just said, "She boarded early. She said she'd see us on the plane." He didn't question it. He rarely does. That's part of the problem. We eventually boarded. I squeezed into row 23 with the kids, knees pressed against the tray table, trying to remember why I let this happen, why I'd let it keep happening. And then I had an idea. Not petty, not loud, just quiet justice. I waited until the kids were settled, waited until she rang for water and tucked herself into that first-class seat like it had always been hers. Then I walked up to the flight attendant in the front. I smiled politely and said, "Excuse me, I think there's been a mix-up with the luggage tags. My daughter-in-law's carry-on was supposed to be an economy hold, not priority cabin." The attendant checked the tag. "Oh, it's marked priority," I nodded. "By mistake. She's in 23C. I think she grabbed the wrong label." She shrugged, unbothered. "I'll have it moved." No announcement, no confrontation, just one of those quiet corrections that restores order without noise. I watched as they pulled her suitcase from the front overhead and wheeled it down the aisle toward the back. I returned to my seat, still cramped, still irritated, but lighter. When we landed, she looked for her bag in the first-class section and found it gone, her face twisted. "Where's my bag?" she asked no one in particular. I sipped my water. "Probably in the back. You're in economy, remember?" She didn't say anything, just walked off, flustered, scanning for the flight crew. I helped the kids with their backpacks. No gloating, no smirk, just a calm reminder that I don't need to yell to be heard. That night, my son pulled me aside. "Did something happen on the plane?" he asked. I looked at him, tired but honest. She took my seat, so I had her bag returned to hers. He paused. She said you embarrassed her. I smiled. I didn't say a word. And I hadn't. Because people like her count on you staying silent. They depend on your politeness to keep power. But every once in a while it's good to remind them. I may be quiet, but I'm not blind. And I don't forget. After the flight, we regrouped outside the terminal. The kids were excited to be in Florida, bouncing with energy and asking when we'd get to the hotel pool. My son handled the rental car. She stayed glued to her phone, likely updating someone about how weird the trip had already become. She didn't say a word to me. Not about the seat, not about the bag. Just silence, polished, tight-lipped silence. And that suited me fine. The hotel they picked was nice, if a bit flashy. The kind of place with a lobby full of mirrors and marble, more about the photos than the comfort. They had booked a family suite. I had a separate room, thankfully. I wasn't in the mood for forced small talk or whispered criticisms behind closed doors. That first night we went to dinner at the resort's restaurant. She ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, told the server to make all sorts of substitutions, and didn't say thank you once. My son tried to keep the peace, nervously laughing every time she made a passive comment about how some people don't understand what it is like to travel in style. I let it slide, but I watched her, not with anger, just calculation. Because when someone shows you how little they think of you, all you have to do is stop giving them room to operate. The kids stayed in my room that night, which they loved. We made popcorn, watched cartoons, and they fell asleep curled up beside me like they used to when they were small. I laid there for a long time afterward, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how far the balance had shifted. There was a time when I was the head of the table, when people looked to me for guidance. Now I was treated like an extra, invited for tradition, but quietly dismissed the moment I arrived. The next morning we had a full itinerary. The school event was scheduled for late afternoon, but the rest of the day was open. She suggested a luxury shopping district. My son hesitated. I said, "Go ahead, take the day. I'll stay back with the kids. They'll probably enjoy the pool more anyway." She didn't protest. Of course she didn't. Less responsibility meant more room for her to play the part she liked best. Center of attention, no interruptions. That pool day was the best part of the trip so far. No drama, just laughter, splashes, and genuine moments. I realized how rare that had become around them. No tension, no filtering my words, just being a grandfather, fully present. Later, when they got back, she looked annoyed. Her hands were full of shopping bags and her phone was still glued to her ear. She looked at the kids, sun-kissed and grinning, and said, "You didn't take them to the mall?" I said they were happier in the water. She rolled her eyes and walked off. That night at the school event, something shifted. The teachers knew me. The kids had talked about me. One of them even said, "So you're the grandpa who helped build that solar project?" I nodded, smiled, and noticed her reaction. For once, she didn't have the spotlight. People were coming up to me, shaking my hand, thanking me. She sat 2 rows behind us, quiet. When the kids went on stage and looked for me in the crowd, they didn't look at her. They looked straight at me and I waved back, proud, calm, unapologetic. After the event, she barely spoke at dinner. My son tried to pull her into the conversation, but she kept retreating into her phone, her own world. And that's when I realized this wasn't about a seat. It never was. This was about control. She needed to direct the flow of every room. And when she couldn't, she acted like the room was broken. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't need to correct her. She was doing that all on her own. The final morning before we left, I woke up early and went down to the lobby. I asked the front desk to confirm the flight details, and I requested a change in seat assignments. I didn't say much, just showed my status, explained that I'd prefer not to sit in the middle row. They obliged. I made sure to tag all of my belongings with priority labels again. Then I went back upstairs, helped the kids finish packing, and waited. At the airport, she breezed through security ahead of us, acting like she was leading the group. When we got to the gate, I sat quietly, let her pace around like a restless queen in exile. And when boarding was called, I stood. She moved toward the gate first, expecting to lead again, but this time the agent scanned my boarding pass and smiled. "Welcome back, Mr. Hartwell. Seat 1C. She blinked. "Wait, that's..." The agent scanned hers next. "You've been placed in 23D, ma'am." She turned sharply. "What? That can't be right." I turned just slightly and said, "Oh, I asked them to switch me back to first. I paid for that seat, remember?" My tone was even. No edge. Just matter of fact. She stared at me like she wanted to respond but couldn't find the words. My son stayed silent. He looked tired or maybe aware. Either way, he didn't defend her, didn't step in, didn't ask me to switch again. I walked down the jet bridge without looking back, took my seat, ordered my drink, watched the rest of the passengers board. When she passed me, dragging her carry-on with a clenched jaw, she didn't make eye contact. She just walked. Quiet. Smaller. And for the first time since she joined the family, I didn't feel like I was the one being tolerated. I felt like the one holding the balance again. Not because I said anything, but because I finally stopped letting her say it all. And I didn't need applause for that. I just needed legroom. We landed in silence. The kind of silence that comes when people know they've pushed too far and don't want to admit it. She didn't speak to me during the entire flight, not even a glance when I stood up to get my coat. She was in the back, of course, and I didn't wait. I walked off that plane with the calm of someone who had finally stopped asking to be seen. In the terminal, my son caught up to me with the kids. They were excited, talking about what they wanted to eat, what movie they had watched on the screen, how bumpy the landing had been. I listened, smiled, carried my own bag. No one offered to help, but I didn't expect them to. When she finally emerged from the gate, she had that same tight expression, the one she wore whenever she didn't get her way. But she kept it to herself. She said something to my son quietly. He nodded, then turned to me. "We're gonna grab an Uber home. You sure you're okay getting to the garage?" I said, "I've got it." He looked at me a little longer than usual, then added, "Thanks for coming on the trip." I said, "Thanks for the invitation." It wasn't sarcasm, just fact. We parted ways. I walked toward the garage, every step a little lighter than the last, not because I had won anything, but because I had stopped giving pieces of myself to people who didn't know how to treat them. Back home, the house was quiet, as it always was. I poured a glass of water, sat down in the kitchen and just breathed. The kind of deep breath you take when you realize you don't owe anyone an explanation. The next day, I got a message from my daughter, not her. "Dad, can you come over Saturday? The kids want to show you something." I said yes, of course I said yes. When I arrived, the kids ran to the door. "Grandpa, Grandpa!" My grandson had a shoebox full of seashells he collected on the beach. My granddaughter had drawn a picture of us at the pool. I stood there in the doorway holding it and realized they didn't remember the tension. They remembered who showed up. My daughter greeted me with a hug. She was always more grounded, more aware. She looked at me and said quietly, "I heard about the flight." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh," she smiled. "I just said heard, Dad. I didn't say from who." I smiled back. "Not much to tell." "Apparently that's what made it brilliant," she said. Later, while the kids played in the backyard, I helped her in the kitchen. We didn't talk about the trip, not directly, but she said something that stuck. "You've always been quiet," she said, "but you've never been passive. People think those are the same thing. They're not." That stayed with me, because I had spent so many years shrinking myself so others wouldn't feel challenged. I thought it was politeness, maturity. But in the end, it was erasure, and I had let it happen until that gate. A few weeks later, my son came over alone. We sat on the porch. The silence between us was heavier than usual, but not angry, just full. He finally said, "She was upset." I nodded. "I'm sure." "She said you embarrassed her." I didn't say anything. "Exactly," he said, "and that embarrassed her more." I looked out over the lawn. Maybe it's time she realized that not everything bends to her comfort. He didn't argue. He just nodded. And then, almost reluctantly, he added, "You know, I've never seen her act that way around you before, so controlled." I didn't respond. He sat with that for a minute, then said, "It's not easy living with someone who has to win every room." I didn't say, "I know." I just let the air carry it. because he did know. And admitting that just a little was the most honest thing he'd said in years. Time passed. She didn't call, didn't text. And I didn't chase that silence. I didn't need to. I saw the kids, I spoke to my son. But I no longer accepted invitations that came with conditions. If I was going to be part of their lives, it would be on mutual terms, not as a silent fixture in the background. One day, out of nowhere, I received a thank you note in the mail, handwritten, from my granddaughter. It said, "Thank you for flying with us. I like being with you. I like when you talk even if you don't talk a lot." That little sentence hit harder than anything her mother had ever said to me, because kids know. They see who shows up, who listens, who's gentle even when being firm. That was all I ever wanted. Not control, not attention, just the space to matter in my own quiet way. The next time we flew together, months later, it was just me, the kids, and my son. She stayed back for work. I booked first class again. My son offered to switch with me. I said no. "I booked it for a reason," I told him. "But thank you for offering." He smiled. "I get it now," he said. That was enough. We boarded. The kids were excited. The flight was easy, no drama, just peace. And as we landed, my grandson looked at me and said, "Can we always fly with you?" I said, "As long as I've got the miles, kiddo." And I meant it, because I had earned every one of those miles, quietly, without making a scene. And now I was finally flying in the seat I had always deserved, not just on the plane, but in the family.